It's time to call out my own kind. Maybe even take a look at myself a little bit. Not something you traditionally see on this channel a lot, but one thing that needs to happen from time to time. As we just explored with All That Remains, with the song True Cult Metal, a statement on that album review revealed something that I've felt for quite some time, something that's an irritant of mine that I see on comments, or really something that I hear a lot on social media, or see a lot on social media. I don't hear it as much, perhaps, in the public, but it's something that I think people just feel a bit ridiculous saying it, so they don't say it, they kind of just allude to it. And that's the concept of true cult metal. And yes, the spelling that you see is correct. Metal fans will know it and love it. To those of you who are outsiders, this will seem a bit radical, a bit strange, a bit stupid, but bear with me. True cult metal is a myth. A complete and total myth. Metal is metal is metal is metal. We talk about things that are perhaps more or less metal. We get into ridiculous discussions about whether or not something really qualifies as metal. We do so much as a culture of music fans to kind of exclusify or make a tone of metal or a sound of metal so exclusify, it's like stupefy, that we actually create more controversy and kind of distance than we really need to. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, true cult metal, it's supposed to be a representation of a couple of different things. It's supposed to be a representation of classic metal. It's supposed to be a representation of metal that sounds a lot more like the metal that was coming from some of the classic innovators of subgenres, or ones of today that certainly seem to be keeping that banner held high. Ones that are not really trying to dumb things down. Ones that aren't oversimplifying things or trying to blend it too much with popular culture or with swag culture. Not something that's considered non-cult is something that kind of is on the borderline of whether or not it's metal or not, or whether or not the band should be qualified to be within this exclusive cult club that apparently has been dreamt up by a couple of heavy metal fans and has since taken the world by wildfire. And it's a myth. It's a myth. The term itself is one that you hear a lot more, or heard a lot more, initially within the black metal universe, within that scene. It's something that was used to describe those that were participating, playing, and creating true black metal. And it's now since become kind of a catch-all term for any type of subgenre, for any type of portion of metal, where the cult side is the one that has a lot more in the way of the classic moments, the classic construction, than the new age. And I see a lot of this that really kind of comes out whenever somebody doesn't like a band, or somebody doesn't like maybe the way in which someone is talking about a band. They say they're not cult enough, or this or that. It's become, at one point in time, an insult. At other points in time, ever since then, it's become more so of a bit of a comedy act, either that or something that's not meant to be taken all of that seriously. And I hope that that's kind of where it's trending, because it's a myth. It's a goddamn myth. Just because perhaps one band of today is not necessarily doing or performing black metal within the same confines as a band such as maybe Burzum did in the 1990s, just because a band doesn't create thrash metal in the same vein as, you know, one of the members of the Big Four, or perhaps one of the more underlooked and underappreciated bands, just because a band has a little bit more of a modern tone to them. Hell, even All That Remains themselves, you have to consider a metal in some stretch, or by some stretch of the imagination. You can't distance this band from not only their previous work, but including their current work. Metal is metal is metal. True cult metal is supposed to, you know, bring this exclusive tone to certain bands as though they've ascended to some sort of grand rank. They unlock the achievement, so to speak, And so now they have been granted permission to join into the boys club or the metal club. It's a myth. It's all a goddamn myth. It's all a way in order to separate even further. It's a way in which to really try to say that the bands that I like are better than the bands that you like, and that's dumb. It really is. You know, I've said a lot of things on this channel. I've talked a lot of smack, and a lot of it probably sounds a lot like, well, my bands, the bands that I speak about and speak highly of, are better than your bands, the bands that perhaps you speak highly of that I don't. But I don't call them cult metal. I don't call them true metal. If I say true metal, what that means is that it's true metal. It's a metal that has been around for a very long time. It's been long established. They've remained true to themselves and true to their craft throughout the entirety of their career. They have not swayed, they've not bent. It's kind of like a term that says, this is a band that never sold out. But selling out by itself is kind of a myth. The only time a band really truthfully sells out is if they change their sound or their image, you know, just because they've been coerced by money. And that's what it is. If a band decides to cut their hair and produce a different style of metal, but had absolutely no coercion by either a record label or an associate, the band didn't sell out. The band made a conscious decision, but it's become also a catch-all term to describe a situation where a band sounds very, very different than they did within previous releases. Cult metal, however, is something that many people would say has its place. They would say that we need to have cult metal, we need to have this subdivision in order to encourage the future generations, in order to create strong music, to create the metal of the future that is going to make us proud, that's going to be more of a representation of all the great highlights and best portions, best parts of metal, as opposed to really kind of denigrating themselves to trying their best to get their craft on the radio and essentially bastardize the whole entire concept of metal being a free-flowing, all-encompassing art form. I can kind of understand that argument. But that sort of subdivision is not something that needs its own terminology. It's something that we need to birth and foster in individuals, and we also have to stand back and have a little bit of understanding that not everyone's going to embrace this culture. We're not exactly living in the brightest of societies. We're not exactly living in a society rich with individuals that want to play something just because it's something they have passion for. It's something that they love. That craft, that bleeding craft, is not evident in every local band in America. And it's very, very evident whenever you realize just how quickly these local bands will dissolve, either that or they will transform into different bands, where certain individuals will go from one band to the next following what they see is kind of a hot metal trend in hope that their craft, their metal, their band is able to get signed based around this new texture, this new subdivision of culture that is currently kind of taking some fire, taking some shape. They say it's all about being a part of a big scene whenever it comes out. But whenever you're trying to follow the scenes, you're already behind. Instead, you should be dedicated to your craft and dedicated to that which you love. You shouldn't have to change up what you do just because you're hoping and praying that this is a venture that's going to make you rich. Because music in 2015, it's not going to make you rich unless you're a rapper or a pop star, and chances are you can do it very easily without even writing a single song, but you damn well better have a good look. Cult metal, as a myth, is preposterous. It's kind of a funny statement. It's one that it rolls off the tongue with an odd cadence. It's not exactly one that feels all of that good to even say. Uttering this term makes me feel as though I'm actually speaking about a new subgenre of music, a new subgenre of metal, where if you listen to the bands within this subgenre, you're in a cult. You're kind of like all looking up to the same Charles Manson figure, and you drank the Kool-Aid and now all of a sudden you're starting to feel a little woozy. It's weird. I don't like saying it. I don't even really like reading it all of that much. And really, the bad part about it is that all that remains placing this in one of their songs and kind of poking it with the stick of their own little unique brand of humor, so to speak, or self-realization. It really isn't helping because it's calling to mind the fact that it exists. It's calling to mind the fact that it's out there. I will agree that it's certainly ridiculous, but by doing so, they themselves have been just as trendy or just as much of a follower rather than a leader than they claim that they aren't. It's how it works. Just stop using the term. Seriously, it's really kind of unnecessary. It's an unnecessary anachronism that just does not really have true meaning. It's a subdivision term, one that's extremely ridiculous. Read it the next time you actually type it and look just how crazy you look. Admire just how stupid it sounds, and whenever you look at the texture of your sentence, think about what it's actually stating. Cult metal. True metal. It's all fucking music. It's all fucking music. Man, when the fuck did we forget that?